Hello, my name is Ben Kelly, and I'm going to tell you about Beethoven's Pastorale Sonata, Opus 28, number 15. This Beethoven sonata follows the sonata form as in the name. This consists of an exposition, development, and recapitulation. The piece begins with an intriguing metronome-like bass on D, and the harmony outlines a 7 diminished chord of 4. By measure 5, the piece has found its way to a D major chord, fully establishing the listener in the tonic of the exposition. The melody in the first line repeats in the second line, only up an octave, almost as a light-hearted echo of theme 1. The piece then continues in D major, continuing the metronome in the left hand. Beginning in measure 19, the statement and restatement of an idea are again present, until the piece seems to shift gears at measure 38. At this moment, the listener feels a 5-1 cadence occur in A major, briefly tonicizing this key. 4 bars later, that same melody and harmony are repeated, only this time tonicizing E major. At measure 46, the same tonicization of A then E is repeated, seemingly with more diminution in the right hand. In the third bar of the second E major tonicization, a 5-7-1 is repeated 3 times, scaling down and landing on the tonic on the third time. Following measure 60, there is a sequence of applied dominants that lead back to the tonicization of A in measure 68. Measure 75 breaks into an 8th note pattern, with the outer voices holding the melody out over the barilage of sorts. C-sharp major is a tonicized key until some chromatic movement brings the melody into an eventual upward stepwise movement, and measure 101 concludes this pattern of 8th notes with an A major chord. The octave E's are used to bridge into the scale in the next measure, which ends on a high A and a D-sharp diminished chord in the left hand. This acts as a 7 diminished chord of E, leading into E, which acts as a dominant for A in measure 105, as the D sharp in the scale is changed to D natural. The 5-7 in 106 helps bridge into the A tonicized section beginning at 107. With chromaticized movement in the melody, this section finds its way back to an A major chord in 123. The scales from 101 repeat, this time leading into a cadential 6-4 chord into the tonic in measure 133. The piece then shifts gears again into a light, jumping melody, as harmonizations in A major play on beats 1 and 2 to push this section along. This is felt as a second theme of the exposition. In measure 155, the melody resolves on the tonic and continues down in a stepwise scale to an F octave, or in the repeat, back to the exposition. If going on, this is where the development begins, mimicking the exposition only in G major. I won't dive too deeply into this until later in my microanalysis. The development mimics the end of the first theme and restates that idea in different keys as the diminutions get more complex and the listener almost loses their sense of the true key. In measure 245, the piece finds itself resolving on an F-sharp chord, which sets the melody up for the following shift at 255. Quietly, the second theme is restated in B major, then restated once again in B minor. At an adagio, this idea is twisted to become an A7 chord, or the dominant of D major. This effectively leads back into the metronomic bass and the first theme of the exposition. This also marks the beginning of the recapitulation. This theme is identical to the exposition, with added 8th note trills similar to those in the beginning of the development. At measure 287, the piece continues as expected, but in measure 301, where the piece formerly arpeggioed into a resolution, another 8th note arpeggio and scale prolongs the harmony, adding another reiteration of the harmony outlined from measure 287 to 295. The final iteration consists of an even faster scale, increasing the intensity before resolving this section as done in the exposition. The tonicization of A is then seen again in the 4-5-1 progression, but moves to D instead of E. The complicated diminution is seen again with the tonicization of A, then D recently established. final scale at 330 goes back to A major. Just as E led into C sharp in the exposition, A leads to F sharp at measure 349. The same harmony is heard as before, now only in the new key. At measure 375, the ascending pattern lands on a D major chord. 380 concludes the following scales, using an A7 chord to lead into the D major tonicization. After this modulated harmonization, the scales from 375 are seen again, but they bridge into the second theme, played in the original key of the piece rather than in the dominant key. After a similar decrescendo scale downward, the chromatic movement shifts into the first theme being restated. The authentic cadence at the end of the theme is prolonged as different chord members bridge into a reiteration of the cadence. After a decrescendo, a short, light 5-1 cadence is played in time, including this movement in the tonic key D major. Now for my microanalysis of this movement, I would like to look at a section from the development beginning at measure 165. This begins with a transposition of the first theme of the movement, this time played in the key of G major. The harmony is identical to the exposition, only in G major, but begins to divert at measure 175, where in the exposition, measure 175 would be a restatement of the theme. This iteration emphasizes a switch to G minor. The right hand plays an eighth note chromatic trill in measure 175 and again in 176, both times adding more stress to the melodic notes following the trills. It is in measure 177 when the minor feel is experienced on the C minor chord, or in other words, the minor 4 chord of G. Just as the major exposition does harmonically, this progression in minor follows the minor 4, diminished 7, 5-7, and landing on a 1-5-1 cadence. Measure 181 continues to complicate the diminutions of the development by adding a G minor scale in the left hand as the 1-5-1 cadence occurs. The right hand consequently lands on octave A's at 185, repeating the 1-5-1 cadence previously heard, this time tonicizing D minor. The same left hand scale reinforces the modulation to D minor. This is where the development continues a pattern of repetition in this 1-5-1 cadence, each time leading to a new key. The third iteration of this progression with the eighth note scale begins at 189, going back to G minor. Things are shaken up when the same material from 181 repeats, switching the two hands and lowering the octave in which the melody is heard. This then leads back to D minor, again keeping the melody previously heard in the right hand in the left. 196 speeds things up, only providing the last two measures of the previous pattern. This includes the half-note thirds outlining the major 5, then the 1 chord on the third beat using neighboring thirds to land on the tonic in the second measure of the sequence. The opposite hand in this pattern scales down in the tonicized key, and then the second measure, it arpeggios up the 1 chord, leading to that hand playing the 5-1 thirds. Measure 200 converts to A minor, scaling to the same 1-5-1 third pattern in the right hand, tonicizing A with the scale arpeggio pattern continuing in the left. A minor is reinforced when the hand switch rolls in 203, playing a flipped rendition of 201. And then after another flipped iteration of 203, 206 enters into an ascending pattern in the right hand, and the intensity increases as it leads into F sharp in 217. To understand the context of this piece, it is also important to understand the surrounding events in Beethoven's life. Being baptized in 1770 and dying in 1827, Beethoven had 3 major periods of works. Nearing the end of his first period in 1795, he had his first concert in Vienna. By the beginning of the 1800s, Beethoven's second period began. It was during this period that several famous sonatas and other works were composed, including the sonata in question, Opus 28 in 1801. More famously composed around this time were the 2 sonatas of Opus 27. Opus 28, or the Pastorale, was given its name by the original publisher, seemingly due to its pastoral feel and retention of a similar pastorale style to other pieces. Following this piece and time period, Beethoven entered his third and final period, which changed the style of his pieces. Beethoven's early and middle works fall into the classical period of music, but he did play a crucial role in moving into the Romantic period. The Pastorale Sonata, however, was a fairly standard sonata in terms of structure, consisting of an exposition in the major tonic, a second theme in the major dominant, a development that reconstructs the themes, and a recapitulation back in the major tonic. That is all I have for Beethoven's Pastorale Sonata, and thank you for listening.